So let's talk about what goes into creating cities that people love. These are the kinds of cities that we spend thousands of dollars visiting as tourists, and they're the cities we wished we lived in. So you can call this good urbanism, but in this video I just call it good cities. And in good cities, the streets are classic and the architecture is traditional. Good cities and towns have street blocks that are short. This means there isn't a huge distance between the intersections of different streets. It also means that the buildings aren't too long or too wide, and they don't take too long to walk past. The buildings all provide interesting colours, textures and details. There's lots of interesting and beautiful elements in everything from the lights to the street signs. And there's also a mix of building types with small shops, cafes and restaurants on the ground floor and houses above them. In cities people love, the buildings tend to be close together, tightly spaced and interlocking, even overlooking their neighbours. They're built right up to the edge of the street. Not an inch of space is wasted on setbacks or spaces that people don't use, like car garages. Good places are designed around the natural terrain and embrace the things that make a place unique. Those odd little pathways, nooks, staircases and points of interest are what makes a place lovable. Places that have this urban pattern are highly sought after, but it's quite unusual for new developments to be built this way, even though they're in such high demand. If you're like me, you might live in a city with lots of bad urban design. These cities often have huge, wide blocks with long buildings. These buildings can take 2, 5 or even more minutes to walk past, and there's very little to interest you or distract you or relieve you from the boring environment. The street level buildings are often blank and blocked off without windows or anything to engage you. These cities often have an urban core surrounded by suburbs or urban sprawl, and they tend to divide up businesses and homes into functional zones like industrial parks and residential areas. And because these zones are strictly divided, it means that if you live in these cities, you spend a lot of time commuting to your job in the urban core, which may also happen to be full of long, boring street blocks. On the other hand, like a good relationship, firm boundaries are the first ingredient to a good city. Good cities tend to have a wall, or at least an invisible barrier, that demarcates the end of the town and the beginning of the countryside. The city doesn't sprawl past these boundaries in the form of suburbs or anything else. And in these lovely cities, we have good streets with coherent complexity and richly patterned architecture. The most common type of street isn't too wide, perhaps the width of one car, and the streets have traditional buildings, which research shows people prefer, and this also helps to take the edge off the compact nature of the city. Good cities have gentle density. This means very few buildings over 8 stories. In fact, Barcelona has more people in it per square metre than many cities filled with skyscrapers. Gentle density offers a better, more even and more equitable urban experience than suburbs and skyscrapers, and more housing overall. When cities have good boundaries and gentle density, with lower buildings and tight street fronts, there's lots of opportunity for natural interludes like verdant rear access laneways and courtyards, which are a natural respite in hot climates. And in case that isn't cosy enough for you, cities that people love don't just have typical streets. They also have streets that are tunnels, or staircases, or even the space behind a park or cemetery wall and row of houses. Good cities are coherent and don't let new buildings interrupt the streetscape to make a point or an artistic statement. They mostly have traditional architecture, which is present in every civilization in the world, with comparable characteristics and unique geographic expression. And this point is important because urban planning and architecture can't be and shouldn't be separated. And although lots of people say it's not possible to do new, that's not true at all, because it's being done, like in Cayala in Guatemala and in Poundbury. The architecture in places that people love tends to be warm or colourful, because people like warm, colourful places. And the local palette derives from the local materials, which makes it look like it belongs there.